So here's our first subject today, and this is that tunnel for the 1 point perspective. And the first thing we do is establish our eye line because that is where the vanishing point happens. So all these converging lines disappear at the end, and this is what gives us perspective. So I start by marking down my little entrance, and then all the other lines come out from there. So when you are out on location, you want to hold up your pencil and try to match the angles to what you're looking at. So as I put in my columns, the ones that are farther away appear to be overlapping and are very close together and smaller. And then as they come out, you get a bit of airspace in between and they're thicker. Everything gets squished down and smaller as it's going away. So the angle I'm using for the doors and the windows here is not as dramatic of an angle as the top ceiling, and the angles become a little more level as they get closer to your eye level. And I'm doing the same thing with the lanterns as I did with the columns. As they're farther away, they're kind of overlapping and really close together, and then as they get closer, then there's some airspace and they're bigger shapes. I'm not really adding in too much detail, but I am putting in some people just to give a little bit of interest and movement in this picture. And I'm also connecting them as they go across the center. I don't want any big gaps in between. And just a little bit of the shadows coming through there. So now I start putting in the ink and marking my best lines. And here I'll start to build up the contrast. So I got all the main outlines going, and now I'll start filling in some of the darks. And I want to have a really good sense of contrast and nice balance of darks to whites here. So I feel like I've got a good balance, so now the color is going to start coming in. I'm starting with purple, but this is kind of a warm shade of purple. I'm not worrying about reality in any way. I just want to kind of surround myself with some nice cools and have my subjects be a bit warmer. So I'm going to cool this purple down by adding a little bit of French ultramarine. And I just kind of push the paint around in the water and try to let it paint itself as much as possible. And now I'll start coming in with some of the warms. And you can see how that yellow stands out nicely with the purple background. And I'll dash in some red to get it even warmer. I want to have this little bit of warm coming through the center, so everything is meant to be used to push the viewer through the picture. And that's why we let things kind of fade out around the edges so that you don't wander off the page. So then at the end, you're left with this beautiful, lively sketch. So the next subject, we're doing Prague, and this is also 1-point perspective, but this one you can see the vanishing point happens out of the frame. So these are our principles of art: balance, contrast, emphasis, movement, pattern, rhythm, and unity. And we use these principles of design to create a good piece of art. So I want to think about line, shape, color. All these things are going to give emphasis to my subject and give movement to the picture and create a sense of unity and variety. So I just try to keep those words always going through my head when I'm working on my designs. So for this one, we're always working from the outside in. I start with the main big shapes, and then I start dividing in the different buildings. And I make some adjustments as I go and erase the ones that are really off. And then once I have my buildings divided, I start adding in some of the little details. But I'm not obsessing over every little piece of architecture. I'm just getting the main big shapes. now we got to do the little grid lines to figure out our windows and keep all of our perspective lines going in the right direction. So again, if you're out on location, you're holding up your pencil and finding the angle and then trying to match it on your page. So I'm already running into some trouble here because I didn't get my dividing lines quite right. So I just kind of mess around with this until things are relatively accurate. So I get my drawing in and I added some people just to get my scene to be a little more interesting. And you notice I left out that big food tent. I only put in the stuff that I wanted to have in this picture and left out all the unnecessary detail I possibly could. And then when I start inking in, for the things that are far away, like the church in the background there, I keep the lines kind of delicate and light. You don't want anything that's supposed to be really far away to appear heavy. So I'll build up heavier contrast in the foreground elements. So here in these foreground areas, I got really dark in the windows and really dark under the arches, and to get them darker, I filled them in more. And I'm going to leave out the very front arches here on this one building because I want the emphasis to be more on this light fixture. Now back here there's another light fixture and there's a dark archway behind it. So I'm going to do that thing where I turn that dark lamppost into a light color or white, and that way it becomes a negative space, and use that negative space around it to show that you have that object there. So the bottom of the post becomes positive again. And my figures, these ones over here on the side, I'm going to get them dark just to balance out my darks a little bit. And some of the other people I'll leave just open. Now finally for the color. So background, soft, light purple, blues. And on this one I want to surround myself with those pretty purples again. I love how the French ultramarine blends in with this pretty violet. So you can see I'm following some of the lines, but not worrying about reality and going outside of the lines in areas. It's more just about making a nice sense of color and contrast. Now you can see this kind of lighter, brighter blue appears like more of a closer color than that other French ultramarine blue. So those set each other off nicely. And now for my nice warms in the center. And I just kind of push the color around in the water, and again, I'm trying to make it paint itself as much as possible. And then I'm going to throw in my red down here to get this corner to really pop so I have that nice bright focal point. Before I finish all the way, I'm just going to push some of these colors a little further and charge them up a little bit more, and then we'll call it done.